The warning light above my bunk turns red before the alarm even finishes its first note, and I am already moving. My boots hit the cold floor of the ISV Halcyon Star, and my hands are pulling on my jacket before my brain has finished waking up. Something is wrong. Ships like ours do not get woken up like this unless something is very wrong. My name is Ellen Vance, and I am the tactical officer on a convoy that was never supposed to see any trouble. We are 3 ships, the Halcyon Star, the Windrose, and the Larkspur, moving through a stretch of space that the Concord Assembly calls a protected corridor. That word protected is supposed to mean something. It is supposed to mean that nobody attacks a convoy here, especially not a convoy carrying diplomats on their way to the most important meeting of my planet's short history in the wider galaxy. I run down the corridor and reach the bridge in under 2 minutes, my heart pounding harder with every step. Captain Owen Farrow is already in his chair, his face lit up by the glow of the main display. He does not look afraid. He looks like a man doing math in his head, fast and quiet. "Report," I say, sliding into my station before I have even sat down properly. 4 ships just dropped out of faster-than-light travel, less than 200 kilometers off our bow, says Marcus Doyle, our helm officer, his voice tight. They were not on any registered flight path. They were not on any Concorde schedule. They just appeared. I pull up the sensor feed myself, because some part of me needs to see it with my own eyes before I believe it. 4 shapes hang in the black, engines glowing, weapons systems already active. My stomach drops. In this part of the galaxy, in a corridor guaranteed safe by treaty, nobody should have weapons hot before they even say hello. "Hail them," Captain Farrow says. Peter Lang, our communications officer, works fast, his fingers dancing over his console. A moment later, a voice comes through the speakers, low and amused, speaking the trade language that most species in the Concorde use when talking to strangers. "Human convoy," the voice says, "power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Resist, and you will not enjoy what happens next." I feel the air in the room change. Grace Ellison, our engineer, looks up from her station, her eyes wide. Even Ambassador Eleanor Hart, who has just stepped onto the bridge in her formal robes, freezes in the doorway. "They think we're an easy target," I say quietly, mostly to myself. "They think we're civilians," Captain Farrow replies, just as quiet, "because that is exactly what we are supposed to look like." I glance at him, and for the first time, I understand something I had only half believed before this moment. Our 3 ships were built with more than diplomacy in mind. Underneath the polished hull and the comfortable passenger decks, there is something else, something Earth Fleet Command insisted on installing before we ever left home. I had trained on those systems. I had run the drills, but some quiet part of me had always hoped we would never need any of it. "They're demanding a response," Peter says, glancing nervously at the captain. Ambassador Hart steps further onto the bridge, her voice steady despite the fear I can see in her eyes. "Captain, we are 1 hour from Concorde, monitored space. If we simply wait, if we stall them, backup will arrive. We cannot risk starting a conflict here. Not now, not before the summit." Captain Farrow does not answer her right away. He is looking at the 4 ships on the screen, and I can see him weighing something heavy in his mind. "Counselor," he says instead, turning to the silver-skinned figure standing near the back of the bridge. "Counselor Thessaly Orvan is our Concorde liaison, assigned to travel with us as an observer and guide through diplomatic protocol." Her large, calm eyes are fixed on the display, and for the first time since I met her, she looks unsettled. "This corridor is protected under Assembly law," she says slowly. "No registered faction should be capable of an attack here. I do not recognize these ship markings." "Meaning what?" I ask. "Meaning either these are criminals, bold enough to ignore Concorde law entirely," she says, "or someone with resources helped them get past the corridor's monitoring systems without being noticed." The bridge goes quiet except for the soft hum of machinery and the pulse of the warning lights. 50 seconds until they close to weapons range, Marcus says. Captain Pharaoh finally looks toward Ambassador Hart. Ma'am, I understand what is at stake for the summit. I understand what a fight out here could mean for how the galaxy sees us, but those are not stalling tactics they are using. They gave us one warning. Pirates who mean to rob a ship do not usually threaten to hurt the crew that fast. Something about this feels planned. What are you suggesting? She asks. I am suggesting we do not wait to find out what they mean by it, he says. He turns back to his console, and his voice changes, becomes the voice I remember from every drill we ever ran back on Earth soil, calm, clear, and final. Raise shields, power weapon systems. Do not fire unless they fire first. The ship shudders slightly as hidden systems along our hull begin to wake up, panels sliding back to reveal what most of the galaxy has never seen a human transport ship carry. I feel my pulse pounding in my ears as I bring my own console online, watching the 4 enemy ships grow slightly larger on the screen as they close the distance. They're hailing again, Peter says. Put it through. The same amused voice returns, but this time there is an edge of irritation in it. Human ship, power down. This is your final warning. Captain Pharaoh leans forward slightly. This corridor is under Concord protection. Withdraw your ships immediately, or we will consider this an act of aggression against a diplomatic convoy. There is a pause. Then laughter, short and cold, crackles through the speakers. Diplomatic convoy, the voice repeats, mocking. You have no escort. You have no warships. You have nothing but pretty painted transports and a few scared civilians hiding behind fancy titles. Power down, or we open fire and take what we want from the wreckage. I look at the readout in front of me. Their weapons are charging. Their ships are moving into an attack formation I recognize from training simulations, one designed to surround a target and cut off any chance of retreat. They're not bluffing, I say. Weapons fully charged. They're preparing to fire in 10 seconds. Ambassador Hart's face has gone pale, but she does not say anything else. She simply grips the back of a nearby chair and waits, the same as the rest of us. Ellen, Captain Pharaoh says, and I realize he is speaking directly to me now. The moment they fire, you have full authorization to respond. Full authorization. Do you understand what that means? My throat feels tight, but I nod. Yes, sir. 5 seconds, Marcus says, his voice shaking slightly despite his training. I place my hand over the controls, watching the 4 shapes on the screen, watching the little clock in the corner, counting down toward whatever is about to happen. Somewhere behind me, I hear Counselor Orvan take a slow, uneven breath, the first sign I have seen that even a seasoned diplomat from a species far older than mine has no idea what happens next. 3, Marcus says. 2, 1. The lead enemy ship fires first. Our shields ripple with the impact, alarms shrieking across every console on the bridge, and for one long, breathless second, nobody moves. Then Captain Pharaoh's voice cuts through the noise, steady as stone. Return fire, all batteries, now. I do not hesitate. My hands move across the console the way they moved 1,000 times in training, and for the first time in my life, I feel the Halcyon Star answer back, weapons hidden beneath a civilian hull opening up on the 4 ships that thought we were an easy target. The convoy that was never supposed to fight has just fired its first shots in anger, and somewhere deep inside me, past the fear and past the shock, a small and quiet part of me understands that nothing about this journey is going to be simple anymore. The first exchange lasts only seconds, but it feels like it stretches out forever. Our return fire hits the lead enemy ship square across its forward section, and I watch its shields flare bright white before collapsing entirely. On the bridge, nobody cheers. Nobody has time to. The other 3 ships immediately break formation, peeling away in different directions, clearly caught off guard by what just happened. Their formation is breaking, I call out, watching the readouts shift in front of me. They didn't expect that. Keep tracking them, Captain Pharaoh says. Grace, status on our shields. Holding at 82%, Grace Ellison answers from her station, her voice tighter than usual but steady. "We can take a few more hits like that before it gets uncomfortable." I glance toward Ambassador Hart, who has not moved from her spot near the back of the bridge. Her hands are folded tightly in front of her, and her eyes are fixed on the display, watching the chaos unfold with an expression I cannot quite read. Fear, certainly, but also something like disbelief, as if some part of her still cannot accept that this is really happening. "Captain, the Windrose and the Larkspur are requesting instructions," Peter Lang says, his voice a little steadier now that the first shock has passed. "Tell them to match our formation and prepare defensive fire only," Captain Farrow replies. "I don't want anyone getting reckless. We hold the line, we do not chase." I appreciate the caution in his voice, but I also notice something else. He is not panicking. If anything, he seems more focused now than he did before the first shots were fired, as though some part of him has been waiting for exactly this kind of moment, the moment when planning finally becomes action. The enemy ships regroup at a distance, and a new voice comes through on the comm channel, harsher than the first, clearly someone else taking control after their leader's ship was damaged. "You will pay for that," the voice snarls. Nobody fires on the Korath Syndicate and walks away. I glance at Counselor Orvan, who has gone very still. "The Korath Syndicate," she repeats quietly. "I know that name. They operate on the edges of Concord space, always careful never to attack anything with real assembly backing. This corridor should have been the last place they would risk an attack." "Unless someone told them it was safe to," Captain Farrow says, his eyes narrowing slightly. There is no time to think more on that, because the three remaining enemy ships suddenly surge forward again, weapons flaring, clearly determined to make good on their threat. This time they do not try to surround us. This time they come in fast and reckless, firing everything they have. "Brace," I shout, and the ship rocks hard as two direct hits slam into our shields at once. Sparks burst from a console near the back of the bridge, and I hear someone cry out, though I do not turn to look, my focus locked entirely on my own station. "Shields down to 55%. Grace calls out, her voice rising with urgency now. "We cannot take many more hits like that." "Then we make sure we don't need to," Captain Farrow says. "Ellen, target their engines. I want them slowed down, not destroyed if we can help it." I understand what he means immediately. Slowing them down buys us time. It also means fewer lives lost if we can avoid it, something that matters to him even now, even after everything. I lock onto the nearest enemy ship's engine section and fire, watching as our weapons find their mark, tearing a bright gash along the ship's rear section. It immediately begins to drift, its engines sputtering. "One down," I say. "Well, disabled, not down." "Copy that," Captain Farrow says. "Keep at it." The remaining two ships pull back slightly, clearly reassessing after watching their companion crippled so quickly. I take advantage of the pause to check our own status. The Windrose has taken minor damage, but remains combat capable. The Larkspur has managed to avoid direct hits entirely, staying tucked slightly behind our formation as instructed. "They're pulling back to regroup again," Marcus reports. "Do not let them get comfortable," Captain Farrow says. "Ellen, keep them honest. Fire on anything that gets within range, but hold to disabling shots only unless they force our hand." I nod, focusing on the two remaining ships as they circle at a distance, clearly trying to figure out what kind of enemy they have actually run into. I imagine, for a moment, what it must be like from their side of things. They expected an easy target, a slow, unarmed convoy full of diplomats and civilians too frightened to fight back. Instead, they found teeth they never expected, hidden behind a friendly, harmless-looking hull. "This does not make sense," Counselor Orvan says, almost to herself. "Human convoy ships are not supposed to carry weapons of this caliber. Assembly regulations on diplomatic vessels are very clear." Assembly regulations were written by people who have never had to protect a species with our history, Captain Farrow replies without looking away from his console. "Earth agreed to travel unarmed on paper. We did not agree to travel unprotected." I catch a flicker of something in Counselor Orvan's expression, somewhere between concern and quiet respect, though she says nothing more. The enemy ships suddenly split apart, one moving to flank us from the left, while the other swings wide to the right, clearly attempting some kind of pincer maneuver. I track both of them carefully, my hands steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through me. They're trying to split our attention, I say. Then give them a reason to regret it, Captain Pharaoh replies. I fire on the ship approaching from the left first, aiming for its main weapons array rather than its engines this time, judging that a more aggressive stance is needed if they intend to keep pressing the attack. The shot connects, and I watch as a section of the enemy ship's hull buckles under the impact, its weapons system going dark. At the same moment, the ship on our right opens fire, and this time the hit lands directly on our shields, near the bridge itself. The whole ship groans under the impact, and I hear something crack somewhere above me, dust and debris raining down from an overhead panel. "Shields at 30%, Grace calls out, real fear entering her voice for the first time. "Captain, we cannot take another hit like that." Captain Pharaoh's jaw tightens, but his voice remains level. "Ellen, take out that ship's weapons. Now." I do not hesitate this time. I fire everything I can bring to bear on the remaining active enemy ship, watching as our weapons tear through its defenses far more easily than I expected. Within seconds, its own weapons system goes silent, sparks visible even from this distance as something inside its hull clearly overloads. For a moment, the bridge falls silent except for the hum of overworked systems and the quiet beeping of damage alerts. All three enemy ships that remain are now disabled, drifting without power to their weapons, and the fourth, the one we crippled first, sits motionless in the black, clearly no longer any kind of threat. "Report," Captain Pharaoh says, his voice tired but controlled. "All four enemy ships disabled," I say, checking my readouts twice to be sure. No further weapons fire detected from any of them. "Windrose and Larkspur status?" "Both report only minor damage," Peter says. "No casualties on either ship." I feel something in my chest loosen slightly, a tension I had not fully realized I was carrying until this exact moment. We survived. We actually survived, and more than that, we won, against odds that should never have favored us in the first place. But the relief does not last long. A new transmission comes through, this one weaker, clearly coming from the damaged lead ship. The voice on the other end sounds shaken, all the earlier confidence completely gone. "This is not possible," the voice says. "A transport convoy does not fight like this. What are you?" Captain Pharaoh leans forward slightly before answering, his voice calm but carrying a weight I have never heard from him before. "We are exactly what we told you we were," he says. "A diplomatic convoy under Concord protection. You made the mistake of thinking that meant we were helpless." There is a long pause on the other end before the transmission cuts out entirely. Ambassador Hart finally steps further onto the bridge, her earlier fear replaced now with something more complicated, a mixture of relief and deep unease. "Captain, we need to contact Concord authorities immediately. This corridor was supposed to be protected. Someone allowed this attack to happen, or at the very least, failed badly to prevent it." "Already on it," Peter says, his fingers moving across his console. Counselor Orvan steps closer to the main display, studying the drifting enemy ships with an expression I still cannot fully read. "I must inform the Assembly immediately as well," she says quietly. "This is far more serious than a simple criminal act. If the Korath Syndicate had help penetrating a protected corridor, someone within the Concord itself may be responsible." I feel a chill at her words, though part of me suspects she is only confirming what Captain Pharaoh already believed the moment those four ships appeared without warning. "Captain," I say, still watching my console, "one of the disabled ships is transmitting an automated distress signal. It looks like it's calling for help, but not from anyone nearby. The signal pattern suggests it's reaching much further out." Captain Pharaoh's expression hardens slightly. "How far?" "Based on the frequency and strength, I would guess it's aimed at a fleet staging point, possibly one much larger than what attacked us today. The bridge goes quiet again, everyone absorbing what that might mean. If 4 ships were only the opening move, then whoever planned this attack expected either an easy victory or a very different kind of response than the one we just gave them. "Get me fleet command," Captain Pharaoh says finally, his voice low and serious. "They need to know exactly what just happened out here, and they need to know now." Peter's hands move quickly across his console, opening a direct line back toward Earth's monitored space, and I realize, watching Captain Pharaoh's face in the low light of the bridge, that whatever happens next is going to be far bigger than 4 disabled pirate ships drifting quietly in the dark. Somewhere out there, someone made a very serious miscalculation about what kind of convoy they were dealing with, and I have the distinct feeling that Earth is not going to let that mistake go unanswered. The response from Fleet Command comes faster than I expect, and when Admiral Julia Ashworth's voice fills the bridge, there is no warmth in it at all, only cold, focused clarity. "Halcyon Star, this is Fleet Command. We have received your report and confirmed the distress signal pattern. Stand by for further instructions. Do not, under any circumstances, allow those disabled vessels to be recovered by their own people before our ships arrive." Captain Pharaoh straightens in his chair. "Copy that, Admiral. May I ask what kind of response Fleet Command is planning?" There is a brief pause before the Admiral answers, and I swear I can hear something in her voice that sounds almost like grim satisfaction. The kind of response that makes sure this corridor never gets tested again. "Hold position. Reinforcements are already inbound." The channel closes, and the bridge falls into an uneasy quiet. I look toward Counselor Orvan, who has been listening to every word with an expression that has shifted from concern to something closer to alarm. "Reinforcements," she repeats slowly. "Captain, may I ask how quickly Earth ships can respond to a threat like this?" Captain Pharaoh glances at her, and for a moment I see something almost like sympathy in his eyes, as though he understands exactly what she is about to learn and knows it will not be an easy thing to accept. "Faster than you're expecting, Counselor. Earth does not have many ships out this far from home, but the ones we do have were never built with slow response times in mind." Barely 20 minutes pass before our sensors pick up the first signs of arriving human ships, and I watch Counselor Orvan's expression change from confusion to something close to disbelief as 3 sleek vessels drop out of faster-than-light travel in a tight, practiced formation around our position. These are not transport ships disguised as something harmless. These are warships, built for exactly the purpose they now serve, their hulls dark and purposeful against the black of space. "That is the ISV Ironclad, the ISV Meridian, and the ISV Falconer," Marcus reports, reading off the identification signals. "Fleet Command's Rapid Response Group. 20 minutes, Counselor Orvan says quietly, almost to herself. "It took your fleet only 20 minutes to send warships this far into contested space." "We built our fleet expecting exactly this kind of situation," Captain Pharaoh says. "Earth learned a long time ago that waiting for trouble to arrive before preparing for it tends to end badly." A new voice comes through the comm system now, crisp and businesslike, clearly a commanding officer used to giving orders without wasted words. "Halcyon Star, this is Commander Nathan Price aboard the Ironclad. We have your position and the disabled hostiles. Confirm your status and the status of your escort ships." "All 3 convoy ships intact, Commander," Captain Pharaoh replies. "Minor damage. No casualties reported. 4 hostile vessels disabled and drifting. Copy that. We are taking custody of the disabled ships for interrogation and investigation. Fleet Command wants to know who authorized this attack and how they managed to breach a supposedly protected corridor." I watch on the display as the 3 warships move with practiced precision toward the drifting hostile vessels, deploying smaller craft to secure them one by one. It is an efficient process, almost clinical in how quickly it happens, and I notice Counselor Orvan watching every second of it with an expression I can only describe as quiet unease. "Captain," she says eventually, her voice careful, I must ask something, and I hope you will forgive the bluntness of the question. Is it standard practice for Earth ships to respond to an attack of this size with a full warship deployment within minutes? Captain Pharaoh considers the question for a moment before answering. Counselor, most species in the Concord believe that a measured response prevents wider conflict. Earth's history taught us something different. We learned that hesitation, more often than aggression, is what leads to greater loss of life down the line. When we respond completely, the first time, so that a second attack never becomes necessary. I can see the counselor processing this, turning the idea over in her mind as though trying to reconcile it with everything she has been taught about diplomacy and proportional response. That is a very different philosophy from what the Assembly generally practices, she says finally. It is, Captain Pharaoh agrees, and it has cost us respect in certain circles. But it has also kept fewer of our people from dying in situations exactly like this one. The conversation is interrupted as Commander Price's voice returns over the comm, sharper now, carrying an edge of something that sounds almost like anger held carefully in check. Halcyon Star, be advised, initial scans of the recovered vessels show weapons modifications and navigational data inconsistent with independent pirate operations. These ships had outside help, and recent help at that. Captain Pharaoh's expression darkens. Define outside help, Commander. Their navigational logs show a jump point origin inside Concord-monitored space, not from any known Korath Syndicate territory. Someone gave these ships safe passage through assembly-monitored systems, likely disabling detection arrays along the way. I feel the weight of that information settle over the bridge like a physical thing. Counselor Orvan's face has gone pale, her earlier composure finally cracking under the implications of what Commander Price just reported. That would require access to assembly monitoring codes, she says quietly. Codes that only a small number of Concord factions would possess. Which faction? Captain Pharaoh asks, his voice low and careful. I do not know, she admits, but I intend to find out. Admiral Ashworth's voice returns over the main channel a moment later, addressing the entire convoy and escort group at once. All units, listen carefully. Fleet Command has authorized an extended operation. We believe this attack was not an isolated incident, but part of a larger effort to undermine humanity's position ahead of the summit. We are tracing the origin point of this attack, and we intend to follow it back to its source. I glance at Captain Pharaoh, surprised by the scope of what the Admiral is describing. Sir, are we talking about pursuing this beyond the corridor, into unclaimed or contested space? If that is where the trail leads, yes, he says simply. Ambassador Hart steps forward, alarm clear in her voice now. Admiral, with respect, an extended pursuit operation so close to the summit could be seen as an aggressive act by the wider Concord. We are trying to earn trust, not confirm the fears certain factions already hold about us. There is a pause before Admiral Ashworth responds, and when she does, her voice carries a certainty that leaves little room for argument. Ambassador, I understand your concerns, and they are valid ones. But allowing an attack on a protected diplomatic convoy to go unanswered would send a far worse message than pursuing the people responsible. If we let this go, every faction watching will understand exactly one thing, that humanity can be struck without consequence. That is not a lesson I am willing to let stand. The channel closes, and I watch Ambassador Hart's shoulders sink slightly, though she does not argue further. I suspect some part of her recognizes the truth in what the Admiral said, even if it complicates everything the summit was meant to accomplish. Over the next several hours, I watch the operation unfold with a strange mixture of pride and unease. Fleet Command ships fan out from our position, following data pulled from the captured vessels, tracing supply routes and communication logs back toward what appears to be a larger staging area. Counselor Orvan spends most of this time quietly monitoring separate communications with Concord officials, her expression growing more troubled with each passing hour. They are moving faster than any investigation I have ever witnessed, she says at one point, mostly to herself, though I happen to be close enough to hear it. A Concord inquiry into an incident like this, would typically take cycles to organize. Your fleet appears to be conducting a full investigation and pursuit simultaneously, within the same day. We do not have the luxury of slow processes, Captain Pharaoh replies, having overheard her as well. Every hour we wait is an hour someone else might strike again, somewhere else, against someone with far less capability to defend themselves than we had today. I find myself thinking about the raiders, about the confusion in that first voice over the comm, so certain of an easy target. I think about how quickly that confidence collapsed once they realized what our convoy actually was. And now, watching Fleet Command move with the same speed and certainty against an enemy far larger than 4 disabled ships, I begin to understand something about my own people that I had perhaps always known but never fully appreciated until this moment. Commander Price's voice returns sometime later, quieter now, more serious than before. Halcyon Star, be advised, we have located what appears to be a staging facility approximately 6 hours from your current position. Preliminary scans suggest significant military infrastructure, well beyond what an independent pirate operation would typically maintain. Understood, Captain Pharaoh says. Recommendations? Fleet Command is assembling a larger response group. We believe this facility may be tied directly to the funding and coordination behind today's attack. Admiral Ashworth intends to move on it directly. I feel a chill at the certainty in Commander Price's voice, the complete lack of hesitation in a plan that, only hours earlier, would have seemed almost unthinkable, launching a direct operation against an armed facility potentially connected to a hostile Concord faction. Ambassador Hart looks toward Captain Pharaoh, her expression a careful mixture of concern and something like resigned understanding. Captain, if this operation proceeds and it becomes public knowledge before the summit, how do you believe the wider Concord will react? Captain Pharaoh is quiet for a long moment before answering. I believe some of them will be afraid, he says finally, and I believe others will finally understand something about us that words alone were never going to convince them of. Counselor Orvan looks up at that, her eyes meeting his across the bridge. And what is that, Captain? That humanity did not come to this corner of the galaxy hoping to be tolerated, he says. We came hoping to be respected, and if respect requires demonstrating exactly what happens to those who mistake our patience for weakness, then that is a lesson we are fully prepared to teach. The bridge falls silent after that, the only sound the quiet hum of our damaged but functioning systems and the soft murmur of ongoing communications between our ships and the growing response fleet gathering somewhere beyond our sensor range. I look at the display, at the staging facility marked in the distance, 6 hours away and closing, and I understand, with a certainty that settles deep into my bones, that whatever the raiders believed they were starting today, it has already grown into something far larger than any of them could have imagined. Earth was never given the chance to choose diplomacy in this corridor. Someone made that choice for us, the moment they opened fire, and now, watching Fleet Command move with quiet, relentless purpose toward whoever gave those raiders the courage to try, I realize that my people intend to make absolutely certain nobody makes that same mistake again. 6 hours pass slower than any 6 hours I have ever experienced, spent monitoring updates from the growing Fleet Command response group as they close in on the facility Commander Price identified. I remain at my station on the bridge, watching second-hand reports filter through our communication systems, each one confirming what we already suspected. The facility is real, it is well defended, and it is connected to far more than a single group of overconfident raiders. When the operation finally concludes, the report comes through clean and precise, delivered by Admiral Ashworth herself, in a tone that carries no celebration, only quiet confirmation of a job completed. Facility secured, minimal resistance encountered once our intentions were made clear. We have recovered extensive data on funding sources, communication logs, and coordination efforts tied directly to today's attack on the convoy. And the personnel at the facility, Captain Pharaoh asks. Detained, unharmed, and already being processed for questioning, the Admiral replies. This was never about causing unnecessary harm, Captain. It was about making sure whoever orchestrated this attack could no longer hide behind distance and deniability. I feel something loosen in my chest at that confirmation, a tension I had been carrying since the moment those first shots were fired. Whatever else this day has become, it has not become a story about needless destruction. It has become something more careful than that, more precise, even in its speed. Counselor Orvan, who has remained largely silent through most of the pursuit operation, finally speaks, her voice quiet but firm. "Admiral, I must ask directly, what did the recovered data reveal about who financed this attack?" There is a brief pause before Admiral Ashworth answers, and when she does, her voice carries a weight that makes the entire bridge go still. The data traces the funding and logistical support directly to a faction within the Concord itself, Counselor. Specifically, to representatives aligned with what your people call the Virel Compact. I do not know the name, but I watch Counselor Orvan's face go pale, her composure slipping for just a moment before she manages to steady herself. "The Viral Compact has long opposed granting humanity full assembly membership," she says slowly. "They have argued publicly that your species is too unpredictable, too dangerous to be trusted with equal standing. I did not believe they would act on that belief so directly." "Well, Counselor," Captain Farrow says, his voice carefully even, "it appears they did." Ambassador Hart steps forward now, her earlier fear replaced by something sharper, more focused. "This changes everything about how we proceed at the summit. We are no longer walking in simply hoping to earn trust. We are walking in with proof that a Concord faction attempted to sabotage our membership through direct violence. Proof that must be presented carefully," Counselor Orvan says. "The Assembly will not simply accept human evidence at face value, not against one of its own established factions. There will need to be verification, likely conducted by neutral parties. Then we provide it," Captain Farrow says. "Every log, every recording, every piece of data recovered from that facility, and from the disabled ships. We hold nothing back." I find myself impressed, watching him make that decision so easily, without hesitation or calculation designed to protect some hidden advantage. It strikes me, watching him, that this is not simply a man managing a crisis. This is a man who genuinely wants the truth known, regardless of how it reflects on anyone involved, including us. The journey to the summit resumes not long after, though the atmosphere aboard the Halcyon Star feels entirely different now than it did before the attack. Where there was once quiet anxiety about how humanity would be received, there is now a strange, steady resolve, as though everyone aboard understands that whatever happens next, we have already proven something important about ourselves, whether the wider galaxy is ready to hear it or not. When we finally arrive at the assembly station, the scale of it takes my breath away, despite everything that has happened. Massive structures float in careful formation around a central meeting hall large enough to house delegations from hundreds of different worlds. Ambassador Hart, Counselor Orvan, and a small security escort including myself, make our way toward the main chamber, and I can feel the weight of countless unfamiliar eyes following our procession, curious, wary, and in some cases openly hostile. The assembly session begins with the usual formalities, brief and efficient, before Ambassador Hart is given the floor to address the full gathering. I stand near the back of the human delegation, watching her walk to the center platform with a calm confidence that I know took real effort to summon. "Honored members of the Assembly," she begins, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "I stand before you today not simply to request membership on behalf of humanity, but to report an act of aggression committed against our diplomatic convoy while traveling through a corridor guaranteed safe under Assembly law." A ripple of murmurs spreads through the gathered delegates, and I watch several representatives lean forward with obvious interest, while others, seated in a cluster I now recognize as Virel Compact representatives, remain carefully still. Our convoy was attacked without warning by a coalition known as the Korath Syndicate, Ambassador Hart continues. An attack that should have been impossible within a monitored corridor, unless someone with access to assembly systems provided assistance in bypassing detection. The murmurs grow louder now, and one of the Virel Compact delegates rises from his seat, his voice sharp with indignation. Is the human delegation suggesting that a Concord faction was responsible for a criminal attack? These are serious accusations to bring before this assembly without proof. Ambassador Hart does not flinch. We are not suggesting it, delegate. We are presenting evidence, recovered directly from the disabled vessels and from a coordination facility identified through their own logs, confirming financial and logistical support originating from within the Virel Compact itself. The chamber falls into a tense silence as the evidence is displayed across the massive central screen for all delegates to review: communication logs, financial transfers, and navigational data, all laid out with careful precision. I watch the Virel Compact delegates exchange uneasy glances, their earlier confidence visibly shaken. A senior delegate from a species I do not recognize, seated near the center of the chamber, rises slowly to address the gathering. This is a grave accusation, if proven true. The assembly cannot simply ignore evidence of a faction attempting to undermine another species' path to membership through violence. Nor can we ignore, another delegate adds, her voice carrying clear discomfort, the speed and scale of humanity's response to this attack. Reports indicate a full military operation was launched and concluded within a single day, reaching well beyond the borders of the incident itself. I feel my stomach tighten slightly at that, understanding immediately where this line of thinking is heading. Counselor Orvan, standing near me, steps forward before anyone else can respond, her voice calm but carrying real conviction. I was present throughout the entire incident, she says. I can confirm that humanity's response, while swift, was measured and precise. Personnel at the coordination facility were detained without unnecessary harm. The operation targeted infrastructure and evidence, not indiscriminate destruction. I believe what many of you are reacting to is not recklessness, but capability. A capability that perhaps challenges certain assumptions this assembly has long held about humanity's readiness for membership. Her words settle over the chamber, and I notice several delegates nodding slowly, clearly reconsidering their initial reactions. Ambassador Hart steps forward once more, her voice softer now, though no less firm. Members of the assembly, humanity did not ask for this conflict. We did not seek to demonstrate our capabilities through force. We simply refused to allow an unprovoked attack on our people to go unanswered. If that refusal unsettles this gathering, I would ask you to consider what message tolerating such an attack, without consequence, would have sent instead. The chamber remains silent for a long moment, and I find myself holding my breath, watching delegates from dozens of worlds weigh her words carefully. Finally, the senior delegate who spoke earlier rises again, his expression thoughtful. The assembly will require time to properly review the evidence presented today, he says. But I believe I speak for many when I say that today's revelations have shifted my understanding of humanity considerably. A species capable of such precise and disciplined response, even under attack, is not one this assembly can continue to view through outdated assumptions. I glance toward the Virel Compact delegates, who sit in uneasy silence now, clearly aware that whatever influence they once held over this gathering has been seriously damaged by the evidence laid bare before the entire assembly. Standing there, watching the session continue with delegates now debating not whether humanity deserves membership, but how quickly the necessary reviews and verifications can be completed, I feel something shift inside myself as well. I think back to the terrified officer who ran to the bridge only hours after this journey began, uncertain and afraid of what might happen next. That officer feels distant now, replaced by someone who understands, perhaps for the first time, exactly what kind of people we are and exactly what we are capable of when pushed. Counselor Orvan finds me later, after the session adjourns for review, standing quietly near a viewing window overlooking the vast station beyond. "You seem different than you did this morning, Lieutenant Vance," she observes. "I suppose I am," I admit. "I spent most of today afraid of what my people might become if pushed too far. Now I think I understand that we already knew exactly what we would become. We simply needed the rest of the galaxy to understand it too." She considers this for a long moment before responding. For what it is worth, I believe today's events, difficult as they were, may have done more to secure humanity's place among the stars than any summit speech ever could have. I look out at the station beyond the window, at the countless ships and structures belonging to species far older and more established than my own, and for the first time since this journey began, I do not feel like an outsider hoping quietly to be accepted. I feel like someone standing among equals, whether the rest of the galaxy fully realizes it yet or not. 3 days pass before the assembly reconvenes for a final ruling, and those 3 days feel longer than the entire journey that brought us here. I spend much of that time aboard the Halcyon Star, reviewing reports alongside Captain Pharaoh as investigators comb through every detail recovered from the coordination facility, searching for any final pieces of the picture we had already begun to understand. The full scope of what the Varel Compact attempted becomes clearer with each passing hour. It was never simply about stopping one summit or delaying one membership vote. Their goal, according to the recovered communications, was to provoke an overwhelming human response, one violent enough to convince the wider assembly that humanity was too dangerous, too unstable, to ever be trusted with equal standing among the stars. They wanted us to prove their fears correct. Instead, we proved something else entirely. They expected chaos, Captain Pharaoh says quietly, reading through one of the translated communications on his console. They expected us to overreact, to strike blindly, to give them exactly the kind of evidence they needed to argue against our membership. Precision was never part of their calculations. They miscalculated in more ways than one, I reply, thinking back to that first confident voice over the comm, so certain we were nothing more than an easy target. They struck the wrong convoy, expecting an easy victory. Instead, they handed us the very proof we needed to secure everything they were trying to prevent. Counselor Orvan joins us not long after, her expression carrying the particular weight of someone who has spent days navigating careful, difficult conversations among her own people. The final vote is scheduled for this afternoon, she says. I believe you should be present for it, Lieutenant. Both of you. When we arrive at the main chamber, the atmosphere feels entirely different from the tense uncertainty of 3 days earlier. Delegates from across the assembly move through the halls with quiet purpose, and I notice several representatives offering small, respectful nods toward our delegation as we pass, a stark contrast to the wary glances we received on our first arrival. The session opens with a formal statement from the Assembly's Senior Council, confirming that the evidence presented against the Varel Compact has been thoroughly verified through independent review. The chamber remains silent as the council details the consequences already decided for the factions' involvement, sanctions, removal of certain privileges within assembly governance, and a formal public condemnation of their actions. A representative from the Varel Compact rises briefly, his voice carrying none of the earlier indignation, only quiet resignation. The Compact acknowledges the findings of this assembly, he says simply, offering no further defense, and I understand that whatever influence his faction once held has been thoroughly and permanently diminished by their own miscalculation. The senior council member then turns his attention toward our delegation, his expression thoughtful. We now turn to the matter that brought this convoy to our assembly in the first place, the formal consideration of humanity's request for full membership. Ambassador Hart rises once more, standing tall despite the exhaustion I know she must be feeling after these long, difficult days. She does not speak long this time. She does not need to. The evidence, the events of the past days, have already spoken more clearly than any speech could. We ask only for what we have always asked for, she says simply, a fair place among the peoples of this assembly, judged not by fear or outdated assumption, but by our actions and our character. The council deliberates only briefly before the senior member speaks again, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. By unanimous decision of this reviewing council, and pending final ratification by the full assembly, humanity's request for full membership is approved. The chamber does not erupt into applause the way I might have imagined such a moment unfolding. Instead, there is a quiet, measured acknowledgement among the delegates, nods exchanged, murmurs of agreement spreading gradually across the massive gathering. It feels appropriate, somehow, that this moment arrives not with celebration, but with the quiet respect of people who have finally come to understand exactly who we are. Counselor Orvan finds me again after the session concludes, her expression carrying something I have not seen from her before, something close to genuine warmth. "Congratulations, Lieutenant Vance," she says. "Your species has earned something today that many others have taken far longer to achieve." "It did not feel like an easy path," I admit. "Few worthwhile things are," she replies, "but I suspect humanity would not have wanted it any easier. There is a certain dignity in earning respect through demonstrated character, rather than simply being granted it out of convenience." I think about her words carefully as we make our way back toward the Halcyon Star, past delegates from 100 different worlds who, only days ago, viewed my species with a mixture of curiosity and quiet suspicion. Now, many of those same delegates offer small gestures of respect as we pass, subtle but unmistakable. Before we depart the assembly station, Admiral Ashworth arranges a final briefing aboard the Halcyon Star, gathering the senior officers involved in the entire incident, myself included, to formally close out the situation. She stands at the head of the briefing room, her expression carrying the same calm authority I remember from that first tense communication during the attack. "I want to be clear about something," she says, addressing the room. "What happened during this convoy's journey was never about proving our strength for its own sake. It was about demonstrating that Earth's patience and Earth's capability are not separate things. We do not seek conflict. We have never sought conflict. But we will not allow ourselves to be tested and found wanting simply because the wider galaxy assumed we would choose weakness over defense." I think back to Captain Farrow's words on the bridge, back when the first shots were still ringing in my ears and I had no idea how any of this would end. Humanity did not come here hoping to be tolerated. We came hoping to be respected. And if respect required demonstrating exactly what happens to those who mistake our patience for weakness, then that was a lesson we were fully prepared to teach. "Lieutenant Vance," Admiral Ashworth says, drawing my attention back to the present, "your performance during the initial engagement has been noted in the official report. Well done." "Thank you, Admiral," I reply, though the words feel small compared to everything that has happened. The journey home passes quietly, without incident. The corridor that once threatened our convoy now patrolled more closely than ever before, the wreckage of the incident already becoming a distant memory against the larger story of what it ultimately achieved. I spend much of the return trip standing near the observation window on the Halcyon Star, watching the stars shift slowly as we make our way back toward Earth. Ambassador Hart joins me there one evening, her expression relaxed for the first time since this entire journey began. "You handled yourself well out there, Lieutenant," she says. "I understand this was your first real engagement." "It was," I admit. "I do not think I fully understood what we were capable of until I saw it happen with my own eyes." She considers this for a moment before responding. "I think that is true for much of the galaxy as well. Sometimes it takes a single moment, a single test, to reveal something that words alone could never fully explain. I think about the Korath Syndicate, so confident in their initial assumption that we were nothing more than an easy target. I think about the Varel Compact, so certain that provoking us would confirm every fear they held about humanity's place among the stars. Both of them expected one story to unfold that day, a story of an unarmed convoy overwhelmed, of chaos and violence used as evidence against us. Instead, they wrote a very different story, without ever intending to, one where humanity's careful strength, rather than confirming their fears, ultimately secured everything we had traveled so far to achieve. Counselor Orvan finds me one last time before our paths finally separate, her expression thoughtful as she prepares to depart for her own return journey. "I have served as a liaison to many different species throughout my career, Lieutenant," she says. "I have witnessed many first contacts, many negotiations, many moments meant to define how a species will be understood by the wider galaxy for generations to come. I do not believe I have witnessed one quite like this." "Is that a good thing or a concerning one?" I ask, genuinely curious about her honest opinion. She considers the question carefully before answering. "I believe it is simply an honest thing," she says. "The galaxy expected humanity to arrive seeking approval, hoping quietly to be accepted, despite our reservations about your history and your capabilities. Instead, you arrived, and when tested, you responded not with the chaos we feared, nor the passive submission some hoped for, but with something far more difficult to dismiss: precision, restraint, and undeniable capability all at once. I believe the galaxy will remember this convoy for a very long time, Lieutenant, not because of the violence that occurred, but because of what it revealed about the character standing behind it." I do not have a clever response to that, so I simply nod, watching her depart toward her own quarters as the Halcyon star continues its steady journey back toward home. Standing alone at the observation window later that night, watching the familiar shape of distant stars that will eventually lead us back to Earth, I think about everything this journey has taught me. I think about the fear I felt waking to that first alarm, uncertain of what waited beyond the bridge doors. I think about the steady calm in Captain Pharaoh's voice as he made decisions that would ultimately shape how an entire galaxy understood my species. I think about the quiet, careful strength that carried us through an attack nobody expected us to survive, let alone answer so completely. The raiders who attacked our convoy expected an easy target, a fragile diplomatic mission ripe for exploitation. The faction that funded them expected a display of uncontrolled violence they could use against us. Both of them, in their own way, expected humanity to confirm the galaxy's deepest fears about who we are and what we might become if given a place among the stars. Instead, we simply answered honestly, with exactly the kind of measured, capable strength that has always defined us, whether the rest of the galaxy understood it before this journey or not. They struck the wrong convoy that day, expecting fear, expecting chaos, expecting an opportunity to prove that Earth did not belong among the peoples of this assembly. What they found instead was an answer they never expected, delivered not through words or diplomacy alone, but through the quiet, undeniable truth of who we have always been. Earth did not choose war that day out of anger or ambition. We simply refused to pretend that patience meant weakness, and in doing so, we finally gave the galaxy something it had been waiting a long time to understand about humanity's place among the stars. I look out at the distant lights of countless unfamiliar worlds, knowing that somewhere far ahead, Earth waits for our return, unaware of just how much this single journey has changed how the entire galaxy now sees us. And for the first time since this journey began, I do not feel like a stranger standing at the edge of something vast and unknown. I feel like exactly what we have always been, quietly capable, endlessly patient, and entirely ready for whatever comes next.